Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about Donald Trump's trade war with China. Initially, of course, it was China, but now it seems like countries like Canada, even India seem to have been drawn in. What are the effects of these kind of tariffs globally? We'll be talking about that and whether they will have an impact for Pakistan and our region also, considering of course that we are, how much we figure considering on a much smaller scale, but of course the potential ripple effect of it all over and what it means for our region, what it means for countries and what it means for within those in the US and whether it will have like I said, a ripple effect for other countries all around. We'll be talking about all of that today. I have with me Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, who's a former ambassador to WTO. Thank you so much for being with us today. We also have with us Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, who's a former ambassador. Thank you for being with us today. Dr. Adnan Sarwar Khan, who is a former ambassador. Thank you for joining us today. He's also an international relations expert. Thank you for joining us today. Manzoor Sahab, like we said earlier on, the effect of these tariffs when we look at one, Trump's global outlook and what he said also vis-a-vis the US, he said that, one, he believes in USA first. That's a very generic statement, but then there's a lot that it enfolds within it. How do you look at that considering China? Let's talk about that firstly and the effect of it on, for example, countries like Canada now, Mexico of course, and then other than that even India, for example. What do we see now and what it means for our part of the world?
Well, frankly, it's an uncharted territory.
Okay.
I know US did it, President Trump did it in his last term and President Biden continued with those tariffs, but really those were not of much significance because President Trump withdrew and EU and Mexico and Canada renegotiated some agreements and withdrew. The only country with which it continued to have those tariffs is with China. But China is no longer the China of old days. China retaliated. And what happened? US was saying that their trade deficit is, 400-500 billion and they like to reduce it. What happened? After those 4 or 5 years, US trade deficit almost doubled, to about $900 to $1 trillion. On the other hand, if you look at China's exports, they have been on the way up. Maybe with the US, they're a little bit shrunk. But overall, the world over, because they shifted their manufacturing elsewhere. They shifted some of their supply chains to, say, Vietnam, to Thailand, to other countries. And overall, China has now more trade surplus of about $1 trillion than it ever had. So it didn't work for US, but it worked well for China.
So you think that it can potentially backfire, like it did in...
Yes, tariffs have, if you look at all the long history, they've always backfired.
Okay,
Even in case of US, they backfired. If you look at the long US history of 250 years, a few times they tried these tariffs in the past. One was when they resulted in the Civil War in US in 1861 to 1864 because the Northerns, because of their industry, they wanted tariffs. South didn't want it, so that Civil War. And then they tried it again in 1930s, what they call smooth harbor tariffs. And that brought in the big depression, which lasted for several years.
Let me include Dr. Jamil in this also. Dr. Jamil, can you hear me? Dr. Jamil, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Audio. Dr. Adnan?
Yes.
Dr. Jamil?
Yes.
Gee, there is, we're talking about tariffs, and Dr. Manzoor here, he's saying that invariably, if we look at the history of the way the tariffs have worked over time, they've failed, and they've in fact had, and the opposite effect of what was targeted. Do you think that's possible with what Donald Trump is envisaging at this time, with the kind of tariff policy that he seems to be talking about?
That's right. In fact, the tariff has always not been able to yield the results which the politicians have been really envisaging. So this time around, also, it doesn't seem that the way hurriedly the tariff is imposed on Canada, on Mexico, and China for now, um, I don't think it will last for a longer time. Why? There are following reasons for it. Number one, that it's all demand and supply. And then to what extent it's going to um, uh, cause hardship for the consumers. Now, consumers are not going to get the same product with the same price in future. And obviously, although the import of certain goods from Canada as well as Mexico would reduce because 25% tariff, once it's levied, the commodities or the items would have much more price in the market as it is today. 25% would be straightway jump into the price. So that means it may go beyond the capacity of the consumer. Not all the consumers can afford 25% jump because in the United States, it's paycheck to paycheck. Majority of the population are on the paycheck to paycheck, and then they have their budgets and they make their budget. So yes, tariff is definitely it's not always that much useful, but this time along, Trump has really made a lot of preparation for it, and he's aiming to jack up and propel his manufacturing units in all these fields. For example, Canada, the biggest export of Canada is one, the car industry, and the second is the oil. Now, oil still, U.S. would be importing oil with a less tariff because they need it at this time. Till the time they go for that slogan which Trump had announced, drill baby drill. While they reach to that level, they might as well then not import the oil from Canada. But the car industries, they are really thinking about it, what to do, and there are many other just to do.
Look at China, for example, Ambassador Saab. Let me also include Dr. Adnan in this. I mean, of course, like you're saying, that China is prepared for this also. In one sense, we know that it's what Donald Trump has been saying. It's what he's been saying during the course of his campaign. So there is some expectation also. And therefore, one expects preparedness. Let me include Dr. Adnan and I'll come back to you. Dr. Adnan, do you agree? You think that China and the world over, for example, those, of course, the more that it will affect, if we look at the effectees of what Donald Trump is saying primarily, are more prepared also for what he intends to do at this time?
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Mahrukh. Actually, the point of the points is that United States, though, is trying to be very tough on the tariffs for many countries, particularly China and the rest of the others as well, and is just telling all the countries, including China, that if they want to sell their products, they must produce it in United States. But the point is that, and that I was referring to the point of the points, that the WTO, the World Trade Organization, which is in full swing and has been, in fact, encouraging the countries to lower tariffs worldwide. Now, this kind of a policy, economic policy of protectionism, I would call, is totally in contradiction to the WTO philosophy of lower tariffs by most of the countries, all the countries in different regions of the world. So I don't know, Trump's presidency, though you see he has started making out executive orders, first of all, I'm also a little doubtful that whether his executive orders, all of them, would stay as per the code of, in the eyes of the code of law, which will be definitely moved in the United States. Some of his orders already have been withheld within 48 hours. But the point is that if he progresses in that, that would definitely, I would not deny the fact that it would not have any effect for the time being. It could have this for some time, limited time, one year or so. But after that, in the midterm or for the longer term, it would just decrease because of the fact that if the whole philosophy of WTO is ruined, you see, it alone will be condemned for retiring from that and reversing itself from that very important institution, which was the post-Cold War institution for regionalism, economic worldwide connectivity. And then you see, United States cannot also have this on its own because now different other economic blocs are emerging. European Union is preparing itself, and BRICS is there. So I would say that yes, they may be doing it, may be successful also in getting it for the United States people, the economic prosperity. But nevertheless, you see, all the countries, European Union has been doing it. BRICS, I think, would be seriously trying to have an alternate for itself. Pakistan, too, in fact, though you see, you may later on ask a question about that, will be more robust in the economic restructuring of its own. It's already doing it on its own, regardless of what President Trump was going to do. So I'm sure that, well, if it progresses.
Let's talk about what, whether it will make a difference. Well, let's talk about the fact of how the WTO will look at it. I think Manzoor Saab is the right person to ask. Manzoor Saab, how do you think the WTO will look at these restrictions, these tariffs? Do they really even have a say?
Well, WTO does not have any armed forces that it concern. So WTO has rules, and it's for countries. They've signed on to them, and they, they normally obey. This, I don't think this has ever happened in the world history.
Okay.
That just a country just decides to go on its own and do this. So it's as I say, it's
so the world is not prepared.
The world is not prepared. And WTO normally used to have a dispute settlement system. But Trump, during his previous term, already got rid of that appellate body, dispute settlement.
Okay.
So, and under the US law, it authorizes the president to issue executive orders under the what they call emergency, national emergency. So it's for the president to declare its national emergency, whether it's economic national emergency, whether it's any other war situation or anything. So it is for the president to determine, and he has determined that this is national emergency. We need for our economic security. So it's maybe, I'm sure the courts are going to intervene, etc. But normally the president has a power, and they never expected that somebody would do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, fair enough. Let me go to Dr. Jamil. Dr. Jamil, as far as Mexico is concerned, of course, particularly when we talk about, for example, tariffs on its steel and auto industries, and the fact that negotiation is concerned. Do you think that it's in a position to negotiate at all with the US on these? And of course, it's one of those direct affectees, and we've seen the recent events with regard to this also.
Mexico obviously is directly impacted with this tariff. Mexico has been given very clear instructions, I would say, because Trump is very fond of giving instructions to the other countries. That they should really control the drug mafia, they should control the immigration. And then probably Trump would be able to kind of reconsider about it. So for now, those about 800 trucks or even more every day, which carry the goods and the products from Mexico to US, would really definitely find very hard because to have that competitiveness in the market. Then in that case, how fast they can cover and how fast they can really fill that gap in the United States because it has its impact on the economy. The goods provided by the Mexicans, it has its impact on the consumer. To what extent consumers will be able to withstand that hardship of extra 25%? That probably in the coming days we'll be able to see. Regarding the WTO, Trump doesn't really regard about the Paris Accord and has walked out from there. Trump has already had given last time during his last administration, had already said about the WTO, a lot of comments he had passed. So he wouldn't really care about what is given the WTO. WTO is an equal opportunity, and therefore WTO one-sided tariff, imposing one-sided tariff, yes, it's against the clauses and the articles of WTO. That's fine enough. But Trump, who doesn't, who is one stroke of pen, says that UNRWA, we are not going to fund UNRWA, we are not going to give full funding to WHO and so on. So, and he has the power to do that. So that would definitely have its impact on Mexico. That would definitely have its impact. Canadian Prime Minister.
I want to come to Canada. We've already seen, some tariffs that Canada has already imposed on a range of US products such as steel, aluminum, agricultural goods. Do you think so? So Canada is already reacting, right?
That's right, but 150 billion against about 400 billion. So Canada obviously was exporting more and importing less from there. But then again, those 150 billion almost import from US, that would be impacted because that's known as the reciprocity. And Justin Trudeau has really used that the tool which is known as the reciprocity. If the country does one thing with you, you can reciprocate with the same thing. So just Trudeau, and he has appealed his nation that okay, let's be prepared and have consume our own items, consume our Canadian.
Is prepared. Do you think that the US is prepared and the people of the US are prepared for this increase when we talk about their cost of living, when we talk about this, day-to-day expense increasing? Like we were earlier saying, and Manzoor Sahab also was talking about, it's largely the country is made up of an economy and with people mostly, paycheck to paycheck. And it seems that, do you think that they're ready for this kind of a reaction?
See how many people are on Social Security in the US and see how many people would go on Social Security, if this happens. Because they, as I said, since they go paycheck to paycheck and they have very tight budget, they make it how much is required for the grocery and how much is required for their other aspects of leading the life and how much is required for the utility and how much is required for the fee of the children and the medicine which they purchase, although they are insured, but still the bulk of the medicine they have to purchase, about 70-80% they have to spend from their own pocket despite the insurance and Obamacare coverage what they have, but still a lot of money they have to repay as a parity. So they would just go out of their budget, and once they go out of their budget, there would definitely be resentment, and that is the bulk of the population. It's not smaller segment of the population. They are already suffering this inflation in United States, and with this United States, what the president is now, what he has been saying during the campaign, he's implementing that. But to what extent are the people at large prepared to sustain that trauma?
But one thing, Ambassador Saab, at the very outset, he's only doing what he said he would. So, of course, the voters and those that voted for him, knew what they were in for. I mean, that's an argument that one can seldom make, but I'm just saying that, he is what he said. He's doing what he said he was going to do. I mean, there's nothing, the surprise element, so to speak, is not there. Let me come back to you on that. Dr. Adnan, earlier on, of course, there were either trade wars or there was, this is an era of trade wars, when earlier, of course, we saw Cold Wars happen and preparedness with regard to that. And now, do you think that the world is ready for these kind of trade wars between nations like the US and China?
Well, this is very interesting. Actually, after the Cold War, it was stated none other than by the United States itself that this would be an era of cooperation and at the most positive competition and not at all of trade wars. And this is what was referred to as the New World Order, of which economic openness, along with the peace building measures and the centrality of the role of the United Nations for resolving conflicts, was going to be an integral part. So I would say that, well, United States, though you see, you have just really very rightly stated that he has been doing whatever he was saying, but nevertheless, you see, I would say that first of all, his actions would not last long because there would be an international backlash. And for example, if I make a hypothesis that if it imposes high tariffs on China and rest of the other countries, etc., Canada, etc., and EU, then and if they lower the tariff into their countries for investments and for imports, so what would happen is that most of the trade would be diverted towards China, European Union, Russia, and many other countries of the world. And in that overall calculation, the United States would lose this war, if at all we call it a trade war. And the United States would be just to a great extent isolated. Though you see, United States under Trump and his supporters are trying to be overconfident and are overestimating themselves. But we have to be clear on first and foremost principle of the present contemporary international relations, that this is neither the world of...
Dr. Adnan, do you think that the world is, the US, like you said, of course, even though he did say that he was going to do this and he has done this, do you think that the US will, like you said, it's going to result in more isolation for them? And perhaps, the kind of, and secondly, if we look at the alliances, are we going to be looking at more economic, alliances based on economic power? Because, of course, like G8, other alliances like that, and less perhaps armfare or, and less concentration on, for example, and more strategic alliances. Do you think that the world is moving towards that?
Well, I think that as far as the trade deficit in the US economy is concerned, till the time it is covered up. And I believe that Trump has that rhetoric as well as his body language and his action-oriented policies are of that type and quality, I would say, that can do that for some time till his midterm of presidency. So if this is covered up, I think after that they will leave this trade isolation and would again be involved in the world economy from region to region. And there is no denying the fact that, well, whatever he has been saying in a euphoria in this initial period, this is always true for different leaders, political leaders who do it, and they try to fulfill the promises, the so-called promises for their voters, etc. But slowly and gradually that comes down and they become realistic rather than overconfident and over optimistic. So I'm very sure, all calculations say that this world of interdependence would come to its actual pendulum soon. And this would only result in some kind of a dislike also for the big businesses as well, not just to for the official countries who would be affected, but the big businesses in the private sector also would have a very negative impact on it. and would not see this as a positive development and not a good foreign economic policy from the incumbent president. So therefore, you see, I think that this will be over, and this I'm foreseeing that
it can have a long-term sustainability. Let me come back to you, Dr. Adnan. Dr. Manzoor, you know, when we talk about free trade, for example, these free trade agreements, do you think that they can have an international law fallout at all? There are checks and balances, or you know, not really. It depends on countries and their own autonomy, so to speak.
Well, normally there are checks and balances. Normally countries go along with those terms that they have signed on.
Right.
But
it's the US.
As somebody like President Trump, who
and
doesn't
it's the
care,
US.
so that can happen. But as you know, other colleagues were just saying, I mean, you see, US, for example, one of the big imports from Canada is crude oil. And if they're putting duties on that crude oil, and the US refineries refine that, and so the prices of oil, gasoline at the petrol pumps will go up, and it's a very sensitive thing. And also the other big thing from both US and Mexico is food products like vegetables, like meat, etc. And these are all very sensitive products. And I'm sure, I mean, as Ambassador Jamil was saying, that they live paycheck to paycheck, is going to really affect, especially the middle classes. Now what Trump is saying is that he wants to increase tariffs to cut income tax. Now income tax is for upper class, and these tariffs will be paid more by consumer middle class. So he's not saying that he will cut you know, taxes for the middle class, but this is an indirect way of doing that, because he's surrounded currently by all the billionaires who want a cut in the income tax, but they don't care about the, you know, the lower the middle class or the poor section of society.
So it will. That's interesting. Also, Manzoor Sahab, when we talk about, Trump is talking about oil a lot. He's talking about drilling oil. He's talking about, and therefore, you know, taxes are, you know, do you think he's envisaging more taxes like you said, and do you think that he's more pro, are taxes overall going to go up? Because, you know, when he talks about pro oil, pro drilling, and, you know, getting more oil, is it going to change the climate in terms of taxes also?
Well, you know, there's an international understanding that due to climate change, etc., we should reduce,
and also international, you know,
international, that we should reduce
of oil,
our reliance on fossil fuels.
Right.
And that's why there was understanding that reduce this, let's go to alternate energies like solar, like wind, like hydroelectric. Now suddenly Trump says he doesn't agree with any of this. And this has, I mean, for the last, you know, at least 20, 30, 40 years, the world has been realizing that climate is changing, that we need to reduce climate these emissions.
Yes.
And suddenly everything is topsy-turvy. So what can you say? I mean,
so what about, you know, I want to come to how it can impact locally, Pakistan, domestically, Pakistan's economy.
Well, two things. One, so far there are no indication that US is going to put tariffs on Pakistan, because Pakistan is not one of their top trading partners. Pakistan is not even amongst the top 30 trading partners for US. For Pakistan, it's a different situation, because for Pakistan, US is the biggest single country market for Pakistan, because we export something like 5 billion.
But don't we have the biggest export market?
That's what I'm saying. That for Pakistan, it is the biggest export market. So if the US was to put on some tariffs on Pakistan, it would hurt our exports. But we have to think it both ways. For example, currently the US is putting tariffs on its those countries with which it has large trade deficits. It is like, you know, like Mexico, like China, like others, and they are competing with Pakistan. So if it, and even India,
for us.
In even India, so it might, if it puts tariffs on them, and we are competing against them. For example, Vietnam, it has a Vietnam, and in Vietnam, Mexico have a free trade agreement with US, so they don't pay any tariffs. On the other hand, we pay high tariffs. So it could work both ways.
So
There's a silver lining.
So there's a chance it could work well for us.
It could, yeah.
But
it could
okay,
work.
so let me take that from Dr. Jamil also. Dr. Jamil, do you agree with what Dr. Manzoor is saying, that perhaps this tariff situation and the fact that other countries that will have these tariffs imposed on them can potentially work out for countries like Pakistan in some manner?
Well, Pakistan can take an advantage out of it. Basically, for example, 10% tariff on Chinese goods and services. Pakistan has to identify those items which within that margin of 10%, what way they can really be competitive in the US market and fill that market. For example, there are about 38,000 dollar shops in United States at 24,000 locations. And those dollar shops were affected. Those dollar shops, basically, who are the consumers of those dollar shops? It's the class which they cannot afford their, and it becomes, it becomes very difficult for them to have their two ends meet. And as again, they would be in a very high pressure because 10% extra they have to earn from somewhere to get that or reduce their consumption. So that's one point. And the second point is about 25% tariff from Canada, and that to the car industry. Now, Pakistan has to quickly just join their heads and hand to have a heart together, and they find out what are those plastic smaller items. I'm not talking about the engines. I'm not talking about the chassis. I'm talking about the small plastic items, the knobs, the buttons, and those kind of items could very conveniently be manufactured, and we are manufacturing it already. Now, what is needed in
as a former ambassador, in your opinion, how soon can we work on our diplomatic efforts to speed up this process, to try to take as much benefit as possible on a diplomatic front? We can agitate this in a diplomatic manner with our diplomacy with the US. Do you think that we can start doing that? Do you think we can start working on that?
I think you are referring to the economic diplomacy. That's right. The diplomats have their own limitations. They can do that. They can really project our economic diplomacy. They can enter into the bilateral agreements. We already have a very good trade relations with them, as you heard, Ambassador Manzoor, that we already have. That is the biggest destination of our export, and there's more than $5 billion that we are exporting to them, and then followed by the European Union. So yes, the diplomats can further, like for example, identify the items which are required now, and in a very war footing. We have to really do that, because otherwise it would be filled by India, the same gap, or Vietnam, or Bangladesh for that matter. There are smaller items which are available in the normal markets in Pindi, Lahore, or Zainab market in Karachi, right? And those items are available in the shops, in dollar shops. And as I was saying about the industry, because Trump is now emphasizing on the manufacturing within its own country, and this time he is quite well experienced. He has the team, and he has the team which I'm sure must have done some preparation, although there would be some kind of a teething period to really attain to that level which Trump is thinking about to enhance its manufacturing. He's already cutting the tax. He's already reducing the tax for the manufacturers, for the top elites of 3-4% of United States of America, who are industrialists or who are the big trading persons. So they would find it viable to get some of the components from the countries where we have a cheap labor, where we can provide the same components. For example, car industry would automatically have a hit in Canada, and the manufacturers, and this is what Trump has said at many occasions, that he would like that industry to flourish within United States. And once that happens, for now, there is a difference of about $10,000. If they manufacture the same car, there would be a difference of $10,000 to $15,000. A car which is costing them about $25,000 to $30,000, now it would cost them about $45,000 or even more. So obviously, once those manufacturers they find that they can get some of the components of those car industries. This is one industry I'm talking about. There are many, and those components, if they are identified at a war footing very quickly. Now, this is not the job of a diplomat. It's a job of the Ministry of Commerce, the FPCCI. I was talking to a very important member and appointment holder of FPCCI, and he said that yes, it's possible, and we can do it provided we are given that facilitation. We have SIFC now that can be made best use of it. What is needed here is, and I would like to really mention it here, is that we should have the task force in each FPCCI, in each Chamber of Commerce, and we should just start doing it 24/7, identify, research those components and the industries, relevant industries, they are given maximum facilitation. If it comes to electricity, yes, we would bear the cost. We can, the population as a whole can pay another few pesos, another 1 or 2 rupees, but at least
fair enough. Ambassador, let me go to Dr. Adnan on this. Dr. Adnan, I think Ambassador Jamil has gone into some detail on diplomatic efforts and where else they can be agitated. What's your take on this as far as our diplomacy with the US is concerned, and also our current relationship with the US? Do you see us being able to perhaps maximize on this to our benefit, if at all?
Yes, in fact, you see, at the moment, the relations are at somewhat low key because, they have already imposed certain, before even Trump came, on certain companies which allegedly, according to them, were providing or getting certain nuclear kind of items from different countries for the benefit of Pakistan. From the United States as well through the private hands. And yes, not to forget that very lately they have also stopped to Pakistan as well as some other countries the US aid, which was funding many important projects in the country. Now, this is a little low key situation between the two countries. But nevertheless, you see, the point is that Pakistan strategically is so important. It is at the crossroads of Central, South, and West Asia, and is well connected with most of the Muslim countries, People's Republic of China, etc. That no country, be it United States or any other big country, even EU as a bloc, can ignore Pakistan for some pretty long time. So this is something that I think is finally going to be balanced by Pakistan's crucial geopolitical situation, and above all, Pakistan's unparalleled role in war against terrorism from its northwestern direction, about which the United States as well as many other countries are so much worried. And no country in the world, it is clear and loud, can be an alternate to Pakistan's effort. The way Pakistan's armed forces are fighting and laying down their lives, that is something very, very heroic. That, you see, nobody is going to deny. And while they, you see, object on certain political rights here and there, though they themselves would be denying it to others in their country or regarding the rest of the countries, they in the same breath, they say Pakistan's contribution are most laudable in this way and in this direction. So I don't think Pakistan overall has been an ally of the United States of America, along with having a very special relations with People's Republic. And this is to the credit of Pakistan's diplomacy since 1962, that the United States has finally come around and has accepted Pakistan's foreign policy of bilateralism, which meant equal good relations with China and United States at one and the same time, by not damaging any such relations at the cost of another. So I think that Pakistan's diplomacy, its diplomats, and overall the political leadership, as well as military, is very strong on that count. And United States just cannot find a replacement to Pakistan. Even India has certain limitations, but in this very vast area of South Central and West Asia, particularly South West Asia and Middle East, etc. Middle East and Central Asia, Pakistan is just indispensable. And not only.
Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Adnan. Thank you for joining us today. Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, thank you for your very valuable time. Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, thank you for being with us today. Certainly, I think that to sum it up, Pakistan's importance when we look at strategically is certainly something that the US cannot ignore, and of course the role that we've played in the war of terror. So our diplomatic efforts to be able to benefit from this policy of the US is certainly something that of course the government and is also currently working on, and we see that, you know, with us to be able to facilitate us, perhaps the US will be willing to go that extra mile if needed. We'll be of course keeping an eye on what happens in the near future. Like we talked about, certainly this is one of those instances, this hasn't been done before. So the world of course will be looking at the kind of effects overall of this policy as far as the US is concerned. And whereas other countries may not have been able to get away with it, it of course is the US. So one has to be able to see what kind of ripple effect we're looking at and how the world reacts to this overall. Some of those reactions are of course already coming in, and of course what it means for the people of the US and how they react to it. And of course that will come out in the next couple of months. Let's see what happens in that regard. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.